I'm from the UK, and as you probably know, it gets a little wet here. Living in London, it's a struggle finding a pair of shoes to keep my feet dry, which is why I'm excited to introduce today's sponsor, Vessi, who make the best shoes for both winter and wet weather. Vessi's Stormburst range aren't just stylish, they're 100% waterproof, with a lugged rubber outsole for extra grip on slippery surfaces, and added lining inside for extra warmth in the cold. All that protection from the elements won't slow you down either. They're lighter than boots, and slip on and off easily. They're made from Dymatex, a super soft knit material that's both durable and breathable, so they keep your feet warm in the chilly months, but cool in the summer. I can pop them on in the morning, walk around town in them all day, and not worry about all the puddles soaking through to my socks. Honestly, it's nice to have a pair of go-to shoes you can wear without a second thought, and know they're suitable for whatever nature throws at you. Vessi also have loads of other styles you can choose from, in a range of colours, so there really is a pair for everyone. Check out Vessi's Stormburst and all of their other shoes at vessi.com/lazymasquerade. Get your Vessi sneakers in the size you want right now, and use code LAZYMASQUERADE for 15% off your entire order. On the afternoon of January 29th, 1991, 9-year-old Lee Hyung-ho was seen playing on a park swing set in his home country of South Korea. Hyung-ho often joined his friends at that very same park during his walks home from school, and often stayed there late into the afternoon. Yet, on that particular occasion, one observer noticed that Hyung-ho happened to be playing there all by himself. And little did they know, but that would mark one of the last times he would ever be seen alive. Hyung-ho lived in the affluent Seoul suburb of Gangnam with his father, Lee Yu-shi, who earned a generous salary as a financial executive. At around 8 PM that day, Lee Yu-shi realized that his son still hadn't returned home from school. He and Lee's stepmother went out to look for him, making sure to tick off all their son's usual hangout spots. But the boy was nowhere to be found. They began telephoning the parents of Hyung-ho's school friends, but when they were told that none of them had seen him, they reported the boy missing. An officer was dispatched to the Lee household in order to take a statement from the couple. Yet, during his visit, there was an unexpected and horrifying development. The Lee's phone began to ring. When Yu-shi picked it up, a single, ophidian voice began to hiss on the other end of the line. Lee Hyung-ho is with me. You have 48 hours to raise a ransom of 70 million won. Await further contact, and do not involve the police. Do you understand? Yu-shi replied yes, and the caller hung up. In direct contradiction with the kidnapper's orders, Lee Yu-shi immediately told the visiting officer what had just happened, and after contacting his superiors, Seoul investigators sprang into action. Using a variety of different covers and disguises, they outfitted the Lee's home with a number of recording and monitoring devices. Ultimately though, they were forced to simply sit back and wait for Hyung-ho's captor, whom they began calling the Snake, to contact the house again. They didn't have to wait long. On the morning of January 31st, the Lee family received another phone call. Yu-shi immediately recognized the serpent-like voice on the other end of the line. I know you contacted the police. The officers listening in on the phone call were astounded. They had taken every precaution to ensure their invisibility, and yet, somehow, this snake was onto them. Lee Yu-shi took the initiative and insisted that neither he nor his wife had been in contact with law enforcement. Lee Hyung-ho's stepmother then chimed in, swearing on her life that they had obeyed his instructions to the letter. When the voice on the other end of the line simply hung up, both the cops and Lee's parents descended into a panic. But their lie had paid off. The snake's accusation had been a bluff, and the passionate insistence of the Lees had convinced him that they were playing ball. After around an hour, the snake called back and instructed the Lees to deliver the 70 million won to a parking lot near Seoul's Gimpo airport. The Lees immediately did as they were told, loading the cash into the trunk of their car. but not without an added special delivery. Along with the cash, a police officer hid himself in the tiny trunk, just in case a very literal inside man was required to catch the snake. He was joined by a team of undercover cops who tailed the Lees to the airport. Following their arrival, the snake instructed the Lees to travel to Seoul City Hall, then again to a theatre on Chungmuro Road. He repeated this process a grand total of 16 times, continuously telling them to meet him at different locations. But in the end, he refused to meet the Lees personally to collect the ransom. Frightened and dismayed, the missing boy's parents were forced to return home for a restless night, and were exhausted the next morning when the phone once again began to ring. This time, Hyung-ho's captor instructed the boy's stepmother to drive the ransom money to a prominent local newsstand at exactly 2:30 a.m. Accompanied by a police surveillance team, Lee's stepmother waited at a safe distance to ensure that this time the exchange would take place. But to their frustration, the snake didn't show. The Lees were forced to wait until February 5th, a full week after their son had gone missing, for the kidnapper to once again contact them. This time, they were told that instructions would no longer be delivered by telephone, but rather by text messages and handwritten notes. The first text message they received instructed them to go to a secluded part of the city. There, the Lees found a note. On that piece of paper, the snake had written 2 bank account numbers registered with Hanil Bank, along with instructions to transfer 20 million won to each account. On the advice of the police, the Lees only half obeyed the snake's instructions and transferred only one of the ransom payments to the listed accounts. They attached their own note, implying that the rest would be transferred on the return of Hyung-ho. When the snake didn't reprimand them for the move, it was interpreted as proof that the boy was still alive. The Lees had to wait another week for Hyung-ho's captor to contact them again. This time, however, he instructed the boy's grandfather, Lee Woo-sil, to clamber under the pier of Seoul Bridge on 88th Avenue at exactly 8 p.m. On this occasion, the Lees weren't so quick to follow the man's instructions and demanded to speak with their missing son first. They were aggressively shot down by the kidnapper, who told them to shut up and obey his demands if they valued their son's life. Scared into submission, the Lees followed the next set of instructions, which involved travelling to the southern section of Yanghua Bridge. Once they arrived, they were to place the money on the bridge before leaving the area entirely. The Lees followed the commands to the letter. Only, instead of filling a bag with the remaining ransom money, only the top layer of cash was genuine. The rest were fake bills used by negotiators during hostage situations. The package was to serve as nothing but bait, and it was bait that the snake would finally respond to. But at the crucial moment of truth, the police somehow screwed up the entire operation. At around 10:15 p.m, just as the vigilance of the police surveillance teams began to slip, the snake drove over to the bridge, grabbed the package, and fled before he could be apprehended. The police were so badly caught off guard that they failed to even record the vehicle's license plate.
장소가 엉뚱한 걸로 됐기 때문에 와서 보니까 이미 돈은 없어진 상태였죠. 그래서 시간이 약 한 3-4분가량 될 겁니다.
As word of the failure spread up the chain of command, they knew they'd be held to pay, both from their superiors and the snake. Within the hour, a call had been placed to Lee Yu-shi's personal telephone. It seems you don't want to get your son back. This is the last time we'll contact you. Lee Yu-shi began pleading for another chance, but it was too late. The snake hung up and remained true to his word. In response, the Korean police moved to freeze both accounts listed on the previous note, ensuring the 20 million won ransom could never be withdrawn. Days later, the manager of a bank branch in central Seoul contacted law enforcement, claiming a man had just fled from his premises after being refused access to one of the frozen accounts. One of the tellers gave a description of the man, but it proved too vague, and the police turned to the bank surveillance cameras for more clues. Yet, while forensic analysts pored over the bank's CCTV footage, a shocking and heartbreaking discovery was made near Han River Park. Lying in a drainage channel was the body of 9-year-old Lee Hyung-ho. The boy's eyes, nose, and mouth were all covered in black duct tape, with his hands and feet bound with nylon rope. The cause of death was determined to be suffocation, with the coroner surmising that Hyung-ho's killer had simply placed some tape over his mouth and nose and watched him writhe and squirm until he ran out of oxygen. It also emerged that the remnants of food found in Hyung-ho's stomach consisted of the same meal he had eaten at his classmate's house the day he disappeared, meaning that in all likelihood he had been slain on the same day he was taken. For a total of 44 days, Hyung-ho's killer had simply taunted and toyed with his victim's family, knowing full well that they would never see him alive again. In the years that followed Lee Hyung-ho's slaying, numerous composite sketches of the suspect have been produced and circulated. Excerpts of the snake's voice have also been widely distributed in hopes that someone, somewhere, might recognize him.
제가 데리고 있다고?
400 suspects have since been arrested in connection with Hyung-ho's murder, and almost 30,000 people have been questioned. But, shockingly, perhaps the number one suspect is actually Lee Hyung-ho's own uncle. It's been rumoured that this 29-year-old uncle wished to punish Hyung-ho's father, Lee Yu-shi, for divorcing his sister and denying her custody of their son. According to a vocal analysis performed by the National Institute of Science in Korea, this maternal uncle's voice was 92% similar to that of the snake's. Furthermore, this uncle was also in dire financial straits at the time of the boy's kidnapping, and the names attached to the bank accounts on the ransom note also belonged to friends of that very same uncle. When it was discovered that this uncle wasn't in Seoul on the day of one of the proposed exchanges, it was determined that more than one kidnapper was involved, and that it was probably a whole team working to extract as much money from the Lees as possible. Yet, at the end of the day, theories counted for nothing, and without any solid evidence to convict any potential suspects, the case was doomed to stall and stagnate. Frustratingly, Korean law means that the statute of limitations on Lee Hyung-ho's slaying expired in 2006, so whoever killed him will never be brought to justice. When contacted for an interview in 2011, Lee Yu-shi expressed his disappointment, stating that there should be no restrictions set on the pursuit of murderers. Yet he also added that he valued answers more than justice. Rather than punish my son's killer, I would prefer to ask him, why? Lee Yu-shi stated. But it seems the answer to that question is already clear. Whoever took Lee Hyung-ho's life was violently jealous, despicably greedy, and never intended to redistribute wealth. Instead, they wanted to punish Lee Yu-shi, and to do so, they inflicted a wound which could never, ever heal. Lee Hyung-ho's case has since been adapted into TV dramas and movies, and was the basis for 2007's Voice of a Murderer. Marilyn Bergeron was born in the French-Canadian city of Saguenay. A bright girl, she showed signs of musical talent from a very early age, was fluent in both French and English, and dabbled in Spanish, Russian, and a host of other foreign languages. After graduating from technical college with a media degree, Marilyn moved to Montreal by herself in 2005, leaving her parents back in Quebec City. She worked a variety of jobs, from sales assistant to freelance sound editor, but was ultimately focusing on a job in the finance industry. However, after just a few months of vocational training, Marilyn dropped out of her program to pursue a career as a flight attendant. She told her parents that the job was an opportunity to travel at a heavy discount. She could chase a solid career any time, but she wanted to explore the world while she was still young. Marilyn's parents later said that such a decision was typical of their daughter, who was often indecisive and reckless. But if she believed that the job would make her happy, her parents supported her decision. In early 2008, however, Marilyn telephoned her mother to explain that she no longer felt safe in Montreal. Her mother asked her why, but Marilyn seemed unwilling or unable to explain. She invited Marilyn to stay with her back in Quebec for a couple of days, but as the weeks went on, Marilyn's short stay at her parents' house turned into a permanent residency. After a few weeks of living with them, Marilyn's parents asked her if she was ready to move back to Montreal. She replied by saying that she never wanted to return to that city as long as she lived. When pressed on why exactly, Marilyn simply burst into tears. Unable to continue living in ignorance, Marilyn's father demanded to know why she was acting so strangely, but she simply refused to give a straight answer. She only assured her increasingly anxious parents that it wasn't to do with drugs, debt, or a toxic relationship. When Marilyn's father asked if anyone had hurt her or attacked her, she suddenly went quiet. Realizing that he was on the right track, he asked if she had been raped. At that point, Marilyn erupted into tears before fleeing to her bedroom. Convinced that this was the reason for her behavior, Marilyn's parents offered to help her file a police report and asked if she knew the man who had attacked her. Yet, to their surprise, Marilyn denied having been attacked at all, and instead told her parents that what she was dealing with was, quote, much, much worse than that. Over time, Marilyn became increasingly withdrawn, and soon stopped communicating with her parents entirely. In turn, her father began researching therapists who may be able to help her, but his efforts would be in vain. Whatever Marilyn was going through, she had reached her breaking point. On the morning of February 17th, 2008, Marilyn told her parents that she was going for a walk. She was wearing suede boots and a long black overcoat with a grey fake fur trim. The only thing that she took with her was her credit card. She left all other identification at home. Just after 11 AM, Marilyn was caught on CCTV attempting to withdraw $60 from an ATM on the Boulevard de Lumière, but her bank denied the request. That same security footage shows Marilyn looking over her shoulder several times, as if she was concerned that someone was following her or watching her off camera. Where Marilyn went during the next 5 hours remains a mystery. She was next spotted at exactly 4:03 PM, buying a cup of coffee in Saint-Romuald, a small town just south of Quebec City. The barista at Café Depot who served her later said that she had an air of sadness about her, but seemed incredibly anxious at the same time. The exchange marked the last time that anyone would see or talk to Marilyn. After that, she dropped off the face of the earth entirely. When Marilyn failed to return home that evening, her parents filed a missing persons report and plastered missing posters all over Quebec City, each promising a handsome reward for any information leading to their daughter's safe return. Hope burned brighter when renowned French-Canadian journalist Claude Poirier got involved. He personally went to the same ATM as Marilyn before she disappeared, and, based on the angle she was looking over her shoulder, he deduced that she must have been looking at a car parked on the street outside. While it was possible that Marilyn used public transport to travel to Café Depot, she wasn't caught on any other CCTV cameras. Her sudden appearance at the cafe suggested that someone had given her a ride. Police theorized that this person could be the key to uncovering Marilyn's whereabouts. Question is, who were they? In the year following Marilyn's disappearance, the authorities begged witnesses to come forward, and went so far as to release the ATM surveillance footage. Sadly, this resulted in no new leads. Local law enforcement found this baffling, since Marilyn had last been seen in well-lit, busy public places. Dozens of people had witnessed her final moments. The CCTV footage was testament to that, but bizarrely, not a single person approached the police with any information whatsoever. At least until early 2010, when Claude Poirier uncovered a promising lead. In January of that year, Monsieur Poirier was contacted by a man who claimed to have seen Marilyn in a place called Hawkesbury, just south of the Ottawa River. He recognized her from the ATM footage, but claimed that she had been living peacefully in Hawkesbury for almost a year. As far as he knew, she was happily in a relationship and appeared to have no idea she was missing or that anyone was looking for her. When officers travelled to Hawkesbury to corroborate the man's story, they showed a photograph of Marilyn to some locals at a diner. Many of them claimed to recognize her, with one of them even claiming that she had eaten there on more than one occasion. Believing they were hot on Marilyn's trail, detectives combed Hawkesbury for any sign of her. After just over a week of searching, with no sign of the young woman, they concluded that she must have moved on. Between the years of 2010 and 2017, the investigation into Marilyn's disappearance stagnated, and the case eventually went cold. Marilyn's parents were quick to voice their discontent with the efforts of the local police, and rebuked one detective's claims that they had done their best. In their words, the authorities were refusing to treat Marilyn's disappearance as a criminal case, and instead of murder or trafficking, favoured an explanation of voluntary disappearance or suicide. In her parents' opinion, Marilyn must have witnessed some kind of violent or disturbing crime whilst in Montreal. Witnessing it had made her the target of some very powerful, very frightening individuals, meaning she was forced to flee the city. But then, somehow, those same individuals tracked Marilyn down to her parents' house in Quebec, and after following her all the way to a small, suburban town, they silenced her forever. A police spokesperson dismissed the Bergeron family's claims as pure fantasy, and while he empathized with their grief, he said there was likely a much more simple explanation for what happened to their daughter. However, in late 2017, an old college friend of Marilyn's was approached by a journalist. This friend, Jonathan Gauthier, claimed to have discussed Marilyn's problems with her in the days prior to her disappearance. Jonathan said that he and Marilyn had planned to attend a party together one evening when he noticed that same sudden shift in her behaviour. After arriving at her apartment to pick her up, Jonathan found Marilyn lying in the dark. When he asked what she was doing, she simply replied, "Thinking." Jonathan said that her mood was briefly lifted by the party's celebratory atmosphere, but at some point during the evening, Marilyn became intensely anxious. She begged him to drive her back to her apartment and wept all the way home. Much like her parents, Jonathan assumed that Marilyn had either witnessed a crime or had been attacked, but again, she denied both possibilities. When pressed for details, Marilyn remained tight-lipped, stating only what she would later repeat to her parents, that the truth was much, much worse than anything Jonathan suggested. "You can't even imagine what I've been through," she said. It felt to Jonathan that if Marilyn were to tell him exactly what had happened, his life would somehow be at risk too. Jonathan's account reignited media interest in Marilyn's case, and as news of her disappearance reached the wider Western world, the investigation began to pick up steam once again. In October of 2022, Canadian investigators announced another possible sighting of Marilyn in Hawkesbury. One of the townsfolk had informed them that back in 2009, in the early hours of a cold December morning, he and his wife had been awoken by an unexpected caller. When they opened their front door, they found a visibly upset young woman standing on their porch, wearing only a light jacket, white t-shirt, jeans, and high heels. This struck the couple as odd. The woman's attire was nowhere near warm enough for the frigid Canadian winter, and yet she didn't seem to feel the cold. They asked how they could help her, and the woman asked to use their phone. The couple invited her in, offering her a towel and a hot drink while she made her call. After failing to get a connection, the woman apologized for the disturbance, then asked for directions to a nearby landmark. She declined the man's offer of a ride, claiming it was close enough to walk and that she wouldn't be out in the cold for long. Then, as quickly as she had arrived, the young woman departed. 3 months later, the couple came across a newspaper article about Marilyn's disappearance and instantly recognized her as the woman who had come to their house that night. only there was one difference. Marilyn had been a blonde on the night that she had called at their home. Her family have since stated that it wasn't uncommon for Marilyn to change her hair colour. But the timing of this final dyeing could hold a deeper significance. If Marilyn feared that she was being followed by someone, she may have changed her hair colour to help disguise herself. While Marilyn's family remain convinced that their daughter fell victim to foul play, Canadian detectives are much more open to a theory of voluntary disappearance. Every single day, a surprising amount of people all over the world simply walk away from their lives. It could be due to financial problems, personal conflicts, or just general dissatisfaction, but not everyone who goes missing wants to be found. Marilyn's family are also open to the possibility that she is one of those people, having stated, quote, "If she has a new life and wants to be left alone, we will respect that." But the more you read into this case, the more it becomes clear that something deeper and darker is going on here, and that Marilyn's disappearance may well have a much more sinister explanation. Let me know your thoughts down below. A big thank you to Sam Riding for writing the script for this one, as well as to all of my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters. Corbin Lowick, Jessie Juck, Clayton Thompson, Aaron McKee, Alex Greensall, Anja-Yekaterina Faustov, asiamina, Azrael Warakai, Cassidy Simpson, Chief Cochuaque, Colin Monsma, Connor Louthan, Dustin and Tiffany Vanderpool, George Lopez, Gina Valera, Gracearchie, Ian Biluck, Infamous-senpapi, Leonardo Martinez, Liam Brady, Lyndon Witebski, Monica Mendoza, Peter Logchurch, Philip Wester, Taylor&Monica Gruenk, The Only Dorita, Zane, TNS Mum, Brad Hammer 33, Mrs. Yvonne Rankin, Lydia Cumo, Nephus 1988, Itai Alon, and Peyton Trolling. Thank you so much for your support. Until next time, guys, remember, the best things happen in the dark.